Hi guys! In this video we're going to answer a question that we get asked all the time, and that is how we found a cheap sailboat. We have had 2 sailboats so far, and both of them we got them on the cheap, and so we'll explain how we found both of them, and we'll also give you some tips on how to keep the price as low as possible. So the first time round we didn't have much experience, so what we did was to research sailboats that were already cheap on the market. So there are sailboats that are small in size that are already cheap. So if you're a single-hander or you want a small sailboat, then that's the way to go. What we did was researching sailboats within our budget and then looking up classified ads for them. We found Kittiwake on a UK-based website called Apollo Duck, where advertising fees are really low or free. And we contacted the seller, already bargained the price down before seeing the boat, and then we bargained it down again thanks to a survey. With Skua it was a little different because we knew we wanted this kind of boat, so a Tayana 37, but all the Tayana 37s on the market that weren't project boats were way out of our budget, so we went at it a little bit differently.
So what I did to find Skua was I went on Cruisers Forum, where you can search for people by the type of boat they own. So I went on there and I searched for everyone who owned a Tayana 37, and I contacted them all with a message saying, are you looking to sell your boat? Out of those, most didn't reply. I guess their accounts were out of date or whatever, they didn't really go on the website anymore. A few replied saying, no, I've just bought it, I don't want to sell it. And then one person replied saying, yeah, I do want to sell my boat, I haven't put it on the market yet, and if you want to buy it fairly quickly and I don't have to get a broker involved, then you can have it reasonably cheap.
So basically we got Skua for about 1/3 of the market value of a Tayana in her condition, because the seller was in a rush to sell. They didn't have the time to sort of spruce her up for putting her on a listing or signing her up with a broker, and basically that's how we got the price down. And we also agreed that unless there were major issues highlighted in a survey, the price that we agreed, which was really low, would not be altered. So we wanted to share some tips with you about how to find a cheap sailboat. Where can you find one?
So first you want to check websites like eBay and Craigslist and sailboat listings, websites where boats are listed by their owner rather than by brokers. Generally, if you want a cheap sailboat, it's better to try and find a boat that's listed privately, because obviously those boats aren't really worth a broker's time. They're not going to make enough money out of it. They tend to stick to the more expensive boats. So the cheaper ones are generally sold by the owner.
Another way to find a cheap sailboat is to contact yards or marinas near where you live and ask if there's any boats that have been sort of abandoned, where the bills haven't been paid for some time, and ask to go see the boat and what condition it's in. If you are looking for a specific model, another way to find a sailboat for sale that is not already listed somewhere is to reach out on Facebook or on the Owners Association and basically contact owners directly. There's also Facebook groups such as Sailboats for Sale by Owner Only and other groups that are listed in the description below, where you can find sailboats that aren't listed anywhere else. There's also specific places where sailboats are for sale for cheap, for example Mexico and Annapolis in Maryland, and places where basically the sailors had to abandon their boat. They sailed there, they planned to continue sailing, but unfortunately because of circumstances they had to leave their boat and they had to put it up for sale. But because of the remoteness of these places, it's really hard to sell boats in the area, and that's where you can put a low offer in. So places like Panama, especially near the Panama Canal on the Pacific side, Guatemala on the Rio Dulce, and the Eastern Caribbean, so anywhere where it's too inconvenient to sail back home, either back to Europe or up to the US or through the Pacific Ocean to Australia, there's bound to be cheap boats.
There's also good times of year to buy sailboats more cheaply, particularly at the start of the off-season, so the start of the winter season or the start of the hurricane season in hurricane areas. And that's because then you're saving the owner from having to pay to keep the boat there that winter and look after it and winterize it and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a good time typically to buy a cheap boat. It's less good in the spring when people are thinking of starting to use their boats, or at the end of the hurricane season.
Also, make sure you check the date of the ad if possible, and whether the price has already been lowered. These are good indications to see whether the owner has put the boat on the market for quite some time and they are getting frustrated, or whether they are ready to drop the price down because they've already done it in the past. Make sure you ask the price for the current berth or yard space where the boat is, because it might be a factor in the sale. If it's really high, the owner might be more motivated to drop the price to sell fast. And of course you need to know the price in case you want to keep the boat where it currently is.
It's always good to understand why someone is selling a boat. Quite often, particularly with the two boats we've bought, it's because people are getting older, they're starting to have health issues, or their parents are starting to have health issues and need looking after. That's quite a kind of typical situation, as sad as that is. And that's also quite typical if you're trying to buy a cheap boat or a boat at the lower end of the price bracket for that particular model. Then buying a boat where someone's giving up sailing is typically cheaper than buying from someone who's trying to upgrade. It's sometimes worth making a very low silly offer on boats. You never really know the situation that the seller's in, and even if the boat is out of your price range, if you just offer your budget and explain why you've only got that much money to offer and that it is legitimate, then sometimes sellers might be convinced that they just want to get rid of it. Maybe they just don't want to pay the fees and whatnot. So that can be a good way to get a boat within your budget. It's a good idea if you're trying to buy a boat a bit cheaper, trying to knock down the price, to get in touch with the owner and explain what you're planning to do with the boat, how you're going to look after it, why you're interested in that particular model, all those kind of things. Maybe try and flatter them a bit. Just anything that can kind of help convince them that it's a good idea to sell it to you for a cheaper price. We've always done that. We've always been friendly, approachable, and at the same time, when we were selling Kittiwake, we were approached by some people who were not very friendly. Didn't really offer any explanation of why they've offered a much lower price or anything like that, and it doesn't really help you as a buyer. So just be as friendly as possible and explain your situation, especially if you're a younger, more ambitious sailor. Then that's kind of quite a big draw to someone who's selling their boat, knowing that it's going to be used for what they wanted to use it for, rather than be sat in a marina just kind of gathering fouling on the bottom and rotting away.
If you suggest a price reduction, you need to back it up with real life sort of data. So just make sure you check the market price for that model and justify why you think that particular boat is less valuable than the other ones on the market. It could be that the engine is way older, it could be that the sails need replacing, or that the rigging needs to be redone, but always back it up with some logic, and the owner will usually understand why you are asking for a reduction. We've never tried to scam anyone into selling us their boats for cheap. We feel like we've gotten our boats for a fair price, and it was a price that was fair on both us and the owner themselves.
Typically people looking to buy a cheaper sailboat are looking at older boats. That's not necessarily a problem, because back when oil was cheap, it meant that building boats out of fiberglass was cheap and people tended to overbuild them. So older boats tend to be tougher, thicker hulls, stronger construction. So any cost that you save on the overall boat you can put into upgrading the systems to bring it up to scratch for modern navigation and that sort of thing. But at the same time, you don't want to buy a wreck. We've met some people who have bought a very old boat that's been sat around for a long time, and they're looking at a very long refit. Always buy a boat with the aim of getting it out and going sailing. You don't really want to spend your life working in a boatyard. However fun it seems to start off with, trust me, it does get boring.
It breaks your back as well, so you're going to have health issues.
Yeah, it's hard, especially for one person or two people to completely rebuild a boat that was originally built by many more people. So just be mindful of not buying a boat that's a complete wreck.
Even if you find a boat that's for sale for $1 or even for free, do get a survey done. It's very, very important, because you don't want to buy a boat that needs so much work that fixing her up is going to cost you as much as buying a better condition one. So after you get your survey done, make sure to start a spreadsheet with all the work that's highlighted in the survey and try to price it up. We always recommend doing all your boat work DIY. Learn by watching videos, reading books, asking around the boatyard to other cruisers, and that will keep the costs down. But if you cannot do the work yourself, you're going to have to ask for quotes, and make sure to do that before you make your offer or before you agree on a price, because you want to make sure that the refit budget is low enough to stay within your budget and add a contingency to that. So that's how we found our two boats and our tips on how to find your own cheap sailboat. If you have any other tips on how to find a cheap sailboat for sale, please leave them in the comments below for others to see. And we hope you can make your sailing dream a reality real soon on a really solid, good-looking sailboat. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel to watch us sail, do boat work, cruise, work and all sorts on our Tayana 37.
I am sitting at this bar trying